everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be propagating and reviving my leggy succulents that I have neglected for quite a few months. I was in the US for a long time, and when I came back, I just procrastinated. So in today's video, I will show you how to remove the pups from your aloe plants and cut off the heads of your succulents and revive them if they're growing out of control. So let's get to it. So these are all my succulent plants. They have, like I said, grown a bit out of control, but they've all started from one singular plant, and I've turned it into quite a succulent army, if you want to call it that. So a lot of the times I will repot them to make them look better. That's what I'll be doing today. See, this one has a lot of growth underneath it, but I'm going to trim it and put it so that it is back in the pot closer to the soil. This is what usually happens when your succulents are not positioned with the right light. So you see how they're stretching towards the window? They're just going towards the light, trying to get more light. So usually I like to turn them around if they're not in the ideal spot. I'm going to try and give away some plants as well. If you live near the area and you know me personally, I'd be happy to gift you a plant. Just let me know. And then we have my aloe collection. It is a mess of tangled aloe. There's even some cobwebs, so I'm not going to touch it just yet. There are so many pups in here, but they're not in the best shape. They've kind of been burnt and overheated in the sun. I think this is what that is. If you know for sure, let me know in the comments. I'm gonna have to find a different place for them, but I also want to separate all the pups from their moms. Unfortunately, that's kind of sad, but I want to repot them and hopefully treat them a bit better. These ones look pretty good aside from the fact that they're kind of a little bit toasted. I'm not going to touch these just because there's no pup. They're in the center of the pot. They're growing okay. So I just need to find another place to put them for them to thrive. Also get this grass out of here. I've kept a lot of my aloe outside because I have so many plants. They thrive outside in the summer, so that's where I've left them and just carry them in the winter when it starts to get cold. With these ones, they have a few pups popping up through, even here closer and underneath. They're getting quite long, the main one. So this dry bit right here. I've never tried cutting my aloe from the stalk, but I did do a little research and I think I can. So like this one too, almost dropped my phone in the soil. Like this one too, it's so long here and quite dried out. I think I'm going to take some sharp scissors or a knife and cut it, leave it to dry out, and then replant it. All right, let me walk you through this next one. So I'm just pulling everything out of the pot. It all comes together, and I'm going to remove this baby. Really, it's just like a teenager because it's quite big, but you just gently tug at the base of the plant, and this one has quite a few roots. It usually comes out pretty easy, and I'm just shaking off the soil to save that. But there you go. Then there's some more that are closer to the mother plant that'll be a little bit harder, but you just pull gently and they will separate as long as you're pulling close to the base. There's this baby one that won't survive on its own, but I still removed it. And then there was this last one that I removed. They all come out really easy. You just need to make sure that you're pulling at the base. And now I'm going to prepare this pot to repot the mother plant. And because it has a root system, I planted it right away. I just made some space, added soil around it, and then pressed the soil down because it can be quite airy and you want it to be kind of compact so it doesn't flop around. But of course it will because they're floppy aloes. But here it is all done. And now on to the next one. This one is a little bit different, but first I started with the babies, just separating them. They had a bit less root system than the last ones, but they still pull out just as easy. It helps when you've taken it out to see the roots, but this one was so wet and compact that I just kind of pulled from inside. And that's the root system of these babies. I probably should have cut a little bit farther down so there was more room for it to sit in the soil, but I'm just learning. This
is the cut stalk and what it looks like when it's done. And then just to finish off, I removed the root system and I saved the soil for replanting once the stalk has been dried out for a couple days. Now it's time for this big one, what you've all been waiting for.
Oh God, this is gonna be a lot. This is the mammoth.
I wasn't intending to keep that, but I thought it was hilarious. So I started by taking out the rocks that I use for stability and decoration. You can see how top heavy this mother plant is. It is crazy huge. Like, I can't even believe it. But this is it, cobwebs and all, because again, I had neglected it. I just wanted to show you it close up. There are so many leaves going in all these different directions and quite a long stalk. So I'm going to start by cutting the mother plant stalk like I did the other ones so that I can repot it in a couple days. And I figured it would be easiest because I didn't want to replant the whole aloe again. And I figured if it dies, it dies. It is huge. Just like the other one, I really should have cut closer to the soil, but I didn't. I wasn't thinking, but that's okay. I set it aside and began work on the babies. I wasn't going to take out the whole massive amount of dirt and work like that. It was just easy to stick my hand in as far as I could and pull them out one at a time.
So we had some casualties because of how much of a mess it was. Everything was on top of each other, really heavy. So a lot of these just kind of fell off or were floating around in the soil after the fact. I'm going to be planting all of these. So I'm gonna have 1 million more aloes. I don't know what to do with this one. I cut the end, and so I just need to wait a couple days. I think I'm gonna wait like 3 or 4 days for it to dry out, maybe even a whole week, and then plant it and try and get it to be as straight as possible because yeah, it's a mess. Same with this one. This one I already planted because the roots were all intact. You saw that. This one needs to dry out as well. But these babies can theoretically be planted right now, and I'll probably do that tomorrow. You can leave them out to dry a bit, but at the same time you can also plant them and just not water them right away. But a lot of them were so moist because of them being outside. The sprinkler has been running. I think they really do need to dry out. So I'll wait a couple days before I plant them. Okay, it is 2 days later. This is the progress on the cutting of the aloe stalk. It is drying out. It was already pretty dry when I cut it. I've never done this before, so I don't know what to expect necessarily, but I'm still gonna leave it a couple more days. This one has been laying out. I probably shouldn't have waited this long to replant them, but I'm going to pot anything with roots, all of my babies as well today. Some pieces got broken off because everything was piled on top of each other. So we'll see if it survives. I hope so. I really don't know what kind of dirt this is. I assume that it's mostly succulent or cactus dirt, but I figured this is where all of the aloes were already thriving, so I figured it's fine, but I do have some fresh succulent dirt that I will be using for the other one. Super floppy and sad, so we'll see. But I'm just pressing the dirt down around it to give it some stabilization. Oh, yeah, see, this one is just breaking off. Okay, we're just gonna do that. Sad. I'm experimenting with something I saw online. So I used a chopstick before, so I'm just reusing this chopstick and this stone to kind of prop it up a bit. And I'm going to tie it together with this string so that all the leaves are up. And if you leave it for a couple days, not too tight at the beginning, but like if you tighten it over the days, it starts to train the aloe to remain stiff and upwards. So I'm hoping that will help in the meantime, and then hopefully we can bring this aloe back to life the regular way, you know, watering it properly. This will do for now, I guess. It's not really how it should be done, but this one's pretty sad. Okay, I'm gonna leave it like this. It's kind of loose for now, and then I'm going to try and find a chopstick in the next couple days. Oh, and I ruined it.
Rip.
and I'm gonna tighten it as time goes on. Okay, so this is the stuff I bought. It's actually what you're supposed to use: cactus and succulent, dirt, mix, whatever you want to call it. I got it at Canadian Tire, if you're wondering. I'm going to use this for all the little babies and get to planting them in this situation. I have some smaller pots as well for any of the really small ones, but I'll pick and choose as I go. I had to discard a few of them because some of them, without enough roots, they just don't stay up, or they were just past their prime. These ones are the ones that made it. Some of them I'm still a bit worried about. They're all gonna be quite floppy until they really develop roots and kind of strengthen in the soil. We'll see how many last. Otherwise, those are all of my little baby aloes, all transplanted and hopefully ready to thrive.
So moving on to my other succulents, this could be a Sedum clavatum or an Echeveria elegans. I'm not entirely sure, but if you know, please comment down below. It's quite dried out, so I used my finger to just remove the dry leaves, and I used a sharp knife to cut the stem with a few inches to spare so that it could sit in the soil, but then I set it down to dry over the next couple days. And then I continued with my other succulents. I want to say this is a Graptoveria Fred Ives is what I think it could be, but I did the exact same thing. I cut the stem with some space to spare, and I repeated the process. This one had a leaf that had fallen off and began its propagation process, so I'm just removing the leaves off of this plant to possibly repeat that and do the same thing, as well as make the plant a bit more straight. The official name of this plant is Kalanchoe tomentosa. It's also nicknamed the chocolate soldier or panda plant, which is adorable. So to propagate the leaves off of these plants, you need to take the leaf off close to the stem without breaking it. I cut it again just so that it would be a shorter plant and had room to sit in the soil and was straighter. And I repeated the same process with this one. I believe it's the same plant, but I'm not entirely sure. It's more spiky, so I used gloves. But this is what you're not supposed to do. Cut the leaf. That won't end up in a new plant. You'll just have to throw out that leaf. But I just continued the process with each and every one of my succulents, whether using a knife or scissors. Either way is totally fine as long as they're clean. I would take the leaves off any of the leggy succulents that have a lot of space between the leaves. This plant ended up growing on the stem of another one, which is totally possible. When you have that open wound from each leaf, that can happen. But each of these cuttings will end up turning into this. So what I do is I position them in a planter all together to make this beautiful succulent planter. Of course, because I had left this for months, this one was kind of on the end of its life. So what you do is go through each one and cut them just as I did the other ones. I'll clean out the planters and then replant them to make a new beautiful succulent planter that will grow and be dense and nice like this one in the future. See, there's another one that has 2-in-1, which I can totally repurpose for my succulent planter. For the ones that are bigger, my prized possessions, just like this one, I'm going to be just removing the leaves on the bottom so that there's an even base and they're all dense and beautiful at the top. I will be replanting this one into an individual pot because it's big and beautiful and can stand alone. On to the next one, which is my Gisteria succulent that has grown quite out of control as well. I'm going to be taking off the top carefully by pulling and twisting at the base base of wherever I wanted a new plant. I'm not sure if this was the best method because it was a little bit gooey, but I'm hoping it'll dry out and be a new plant in the future. And then I just finished up with my last planter. You can see that this is the one where they are extra leggy because they're really reaching for the sun. So what I do to combat that is I flip the planter around. Obviously, I wasn't in the country to do that. This is why that happened. But this is what you're left with, quite dry, succulent leaves that I cleaned out off camera. And I just wanted to also show you this plant as a propagated leaf. You just simply leave a leaf on the soil and this is what will happen. It will form roots and a little succulent baby will pop out and eventually it will look like this. For the bigger leaves, it works out better than some of the smaller leaves. But because I didn't want any more plants that I already had, I didn't start this process over again. I just worked with all my succulent heads that were already developed and I kept a few leaves just in case I changed my mind. But this is a few days later, around 3 or 4 days, where the ends are dried out. They need to be dried out before you introduce them to soil so that they don't start to rot. So here's what I'm working with. I have the cleaned out soil and some extra from all the pots that I had emptied and cleaned out of the roots. This is one of my pots. I hand painted it with my friends at our girls' cottage weekend. I vlogged it so you can check that out. But I love this one. I'm gonna put my most amazing succulent in that one. It will look so cute. I have some extra pots, some tiny pots that actually came from a wedding as a favor. And then these ones are from Amazon. They're ceramic pots. I'll try and link them below if I can find the links, if they're still available, but they are really cute to just leave on your windowsill and have little succulents in them. So I'm just spraying the soil just a little bit. This is not really necessary, but because the soil was so dry, it was just flaking all over the place that I just needed to do a little bit of spraying. And then I just used a chopstick to poke a hole. This is extra helpful if your soil is regular and dense and not as dry. It really wasn't that necessary, but I poked a hole and stuck the stem of each succulent in there, positioning them so they're not too close together. I could have left a little bit more room on some of them, but otherwise, this is how you make a succulent planter at home. Last but not least, this is my Gisteria plant, which I did remove 2 of the leaves and left them out to dry with everything else. I poked a hole with a knife in the soil and tried to propagate them that way, but I did run out of soil, so I used the water method for the first time. So I stuck water in a little container, covered it with saran wrap, and secured it with a rubber band, then poked a tiny hole with a sharp knife and stuck the leaf in until the end was just touching the water. I did this with a few of them to see if they would root and not rot. That can happen, but we'll see. Like for a part 2 if you want to see how that goes. And because it had been about a week since I planted my aloes, I decided to water them, but not too much. You don't want to water them too much regularly, but especially once they have been planted. So I just watered them a bit before moving on to replanting the ones that I hadn't planted yet that needed to dry out a few more days. This is what it looks like. I just poked a hole in the soil and tried to balance it. I really should have cut a bit more of the stem, I think, but I used some rocks to stabilize them and add some decoration as well so that they would stay up. And that's it. After a few days, I watered my succulents with a spray bottle only. At the beginning, they really cannot handle too much water, especially when the roots are being formed. If you put too much water in, they'll just start floating around and kind of float away. But a few days later, I did water these ones with a proper watering can just until the water pooled and it would drain. I'll leave a timeline in the description if you're curious, but please don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you did enjoy it. I really appreciate you watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.